Okay, well, the vision for Rebel Moon is a spectacular one, but after watching part two, it's clear that this vision is far from complete, at least and especially in this version. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, reads, Korra and surviving warriors prepare to defend Velt, their new home, alongside its people against the realm. The warriors face their pasts, revealing their motivations before the realm's forces arrive to crush the growing rebellion. Okay, so what does this thing basically feel like? I'm assuming that you've watched the first one, and so inadvertently some spoilers might be involved here for part one of Rebel Moon. Part one collected the ensemble cast and established the premise, the villains. Part two gives some, I think, much needed, but still too little background and motivation for characters, even while not introducing more crazy alien sci-fi concepts and world building and lore, which this movie doesn't really do. I still felt like this world is too big for this movie. And by the end, it's clear that this is just the beginning of an intended saga. Whether that's going to be multiple movies or spin-offs into a Netflix series, I have no idea what the intent or the hopes might be. But the ultimate bad guy remains distant and untouchable by the end of this movie. So it does give off that Star Wars vibe of like, okay, this is intended to be a multi-installment saga. That said, subtext in performances here suggests really some unmentioned depth to characters and their backstories. So despite not having those character moments explored more in this movie, there was suggestion that my mind could kind of like, fill in the gaps as I imagine what those deeper backgrounds might be. And there was more character focus in general than is typical in Star Wars, which these movies arguably demand comparison to. The stakes remain heavy and the villains truly evil. We learn more about just how evil this empire is, the horrible effects it's had on so many people, and the demand is felt to have justice for its many travesties. So even though I wanted character and story details fleshed out much more, I felt more watching this movie than anything Star Wars I've watched in the last 10 years, especially because of one way in which this story breaks from convention and goes where Star Wars probably never would dramatically, because audiences would say, oh, I don't like that, that's unsatisfying, that's too dark or complex or whatever. They just emotionally wouldn't like to be left, feeling that, and they would want some kind of resolution, or they would want things to turn out differently or whatever. And in one key way, this movie says we're not doing that. We're doing something else. So don't feel like you're going to walk away from this with a nice happy bow tied on everything. It's similar in its overall pacing to the first movie and has a similar blend of story, action, and character development when compared to part one. It feels really solid with some strong moments to me, but in other ways forgettable, and leaving me very much wanting the director's cut coming later this summer. As far as the cast goes, really great performances. I don't really have any complaints here. In particular, I'm going to butcher his name, but Jimon Hansu as General Titus, Sophia Boutella as Korra, and Bae Duna, probably messing up all these names, as the dual sword-wielding nemesis. All three of these performers had great moments where they added so much without saying a word. And I love it when actors are given opportunity to do that. It made it obvious to me that there is a lot more to their characters than what we are getting directly from the dialogue. I would think and hope that we'll see more of where those performances are coming from in the director's cut. But even if we don't, I really appreciate what it adds and how it gets my mind working to kind of speculate and fill in some of those gaps myself. It adds a richness to these characters that, even though it's not coming out in the actual dialogue, it adds layers and depth to the experience. Ed, another name I'm going to screw up, Screen. Anyway, he plays the villain Atticus and is still great as that character here, but I would have liked there to be something different about him in part two that reflected what happened to him at the end of part one. I think he should come out of that experience significantly changed in some way. I don't know what, physically, emotionally, mentally, I don't know. But I think I wanted him to be a little more unhinged, or just to be carrying in his performance this time the experience of the end of the first movie. As far as stunts and visuals go, it's a good 45 minutes or so before I see some truly Zack Snyderian visual flair. But the signature style of Snyder gets its moments for sure in the second half. And yet there were once again fight scenes and sequences that I would have wanted or expected to better resemble the style that Snyder is known for. I assume that we'll get more of that in the director's cuts, but that doesn't help the experience here. It still felt like a shortcoming compared to his other work. Again, it wasn't completely absent. There was definitely moments in the back half that I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Several action sequences like, yeah, that's some Snyder right there, you know. But there were other scenes where I was like, oh, I would have expected a little bit more, Snyderian visual flair there. But otherwise, there is tons of space sci-fi spectacle that scratches a similar itch as Star Wars, but feeling fresh and intense instead of tired and familiar. Okay, themes. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? The main ensemble of protagonists all share past regrets with each other in this movie. Some regrets are from failures in their capabilities. They wish they would have been stronger and more capable, and as a result, something tragic happened in their past. Others are haunted by failures from their character, from their own moral choices. But redemption is only vaguely a factor here. Instead of seeking forgiveness, the general sentiment from all these characters is to get revenge or to in some other way make up for past failures by their increased efforts against evil going forward. But this theme, if we can even call it that, is so subtly stated, I don't think it's likely to stimulate worthwhile reflection or meant to stimulate worthwhile reflection on the idea of guilt, forgiveness, redemption, that kind of thing. It mainly functions as a dramatic mechanism to motivate characters. Let's see. Okay, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, well, watch this. I mean, you've got to watch it. You're such a Snyder fan, you're not going to miss it. But watch it knowing that it's going to fall short of the unbridled Snyder that you've developed such a taste for. Enjoy it for what it is, and think of it as a ridiculously long trailer for the real version of this story coming to Netflix later this summer. This one is rated PG-13 for sequences of strong violence, brief strong language, and suicide. All right, and those are all of my thoughts for now on Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. As always, I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/spiritblade productions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.
I'd like to